Hi, and thank you for joining me for this talk, Make It Real, Effective News Literacy in Primary Settings. My name's Elli Narewska. I am the Programme Manager for Primary Education at the Guardian Foundation, and I run a programme called Newswise. Now, in the past year, the threat of COVID-19 has brought the real-life dangers of misinformation into sharper relief and highlighted the importance of access to clear, truthful information. It's shown it's more crucial than ever that we equip young people with the critical skills to judge what's trustworthy. And in our work with primary-aged children around the UK, Newswise is helping educators to develop those skills with their classes. This talk will share the results of our evaluation and explore how the unique structure of the Newswise programme engages young children with news and information literacy. Now, in true teacher style, I've got some slides to accompany this presentation. So Newswise is the only UK-wide free news literacy programme for 7 to 11-year-olds. The programme is run in partnership by the Guardian Foundation, the National Literacy Trust and the PSHE Association, bringing together expertise in journalism, literacy and PSHE education to address concerns raised by the National Literacy Trust's report on fake news and critical literacy, that young people trust the news less as a result of fake news, that only 2% of children have the critical literacy skills they need to identify fake news, and that teachers are concerned about the effect that fake news is having on children's well-being. So how do we address all of those things with primary pupils? The Newswise programme comprises a full unit of work, workshops, interactions with journalists, and opportunities for children to source, investigate, write, and share real news stories on subjects that matter to them. All of our resources are also available online for all educators to access for free. And essential to all of our work is the use of real life examples and putting skills in a real world context to make learning immersive and fun and help to develop responsible, empowered citizens of the future. And that's the focus of my talk today. Now, our evaluation results show that our approach works. For context, this data refers to 2019 to 20, when the Newswise team worked with 3,715 pupils in 75 primary schools across the UK. And in addition, we trained over 1,000 teachers, helping to support schools to embed news literacy across the curriculum. So how this evaluation works is that we do a skills test before the programme starts, and then a survey after the live workshop that we do with the pupils, and then a final survey and skills test after the full project has completed. And the results show that pupils taking part had increased interest in news, greater critical engagement, and improved confidence when navigating news. So, for example, the percentage of pupils who say they're interested in news more than doubled, and pupils were more likely to say that they read, watch, or listen to news even several weeks after taking part. At the end of the programme, pupils are twice as likely to say that they'd check whether news came from a person or organisation that they trust. And 83% said they found it easy to tell whether or not a news story was trustworthy after taking part, compared to just 33% beforehand. And it's not just what the pupils say, because 100% of teachers said that pupils have a better understanding of different aspects of news, like the difference between fact and opinion. 97% said pupil skills in thinking critically about news stories increased, and 90% said that they were now more confident in supporting pupils' news literacy. But it's not just about the stats. On the slide here, you can see the sorts of things that teachers reported about the impact that taking part in the programme had on pupils. They told us that not only did children develop key critical media literacy skills, but also that learning in this way about real life events with a real world context had an impact on other core skills. So with a focus on being an active consumer and producer of news literacy also enhances lots of other key areas of primary education. I especially like this one. One pupil enjoyed planning an article about the local area and said it was the best lesson he'd ever had in literacy. This pupil struggled to engage in literacy topics in the past, but really enjoyed the Newswise project. So what's our approach for working with primary schools? How do we engage children like the boy in that last quote? As I've mentioned, as well as being fun, authenticity is key to our approach. So using real news stories and relating what children are learning to the real world. exploring different roles in a newsroom, meeting real journalists, and this really ignites their curiosity and brings learning to life. We start by giving a project a real life context. So creating an immersive learning experience by making all the learning part of journalist training school. So all the skills that children are learning are used in the real world. It's been brilliant to see how teachers have taken this on and transformed their classrooms into newsrooms. So physically transforming the space, borrowing clocks from around the school and setting them to the different time zones that are most important to the children in their classes, giving pupils press passes that must be worn at all times, teachers acting in role as chief editor, so they're in charge of the newsroom in front of them, even graduation ceremonies to celebrate children graduating from journalist training school. So creating an inspirational environment for learning. And even more impactful in terms of immersive learning is giving children the opportunity to work in role as a reporter or a picture editor or a sub-editor, or putting the class into editorial teams, national news, international sport, science, and they've got to decide on the top news stories for their section and then explain why in a class-wide news conference, like the one you can see on the screen here. And this is replicating what happens in newsrooms across the world every day. And if children also have the chance to hear from a real journalist explaining their role, it helps them to relate what they're learning to a real person. So to hear from the horse's mouth why fact-checking is so important, or what makes a great headline, or why some stories are more newsworthy than others. And all of this helps to demystify the news and how it's made. And of course, by understanding how news is put together, you're better able to deconstruct it. And analysing news is a huge part of news literacy, of course. And why is it important to use real news stories when you're doing this? Obviously, because children respond to real issues. We found the greatest success comes with social issue stories that really engage children's sense of fairness and justice. They really care about stories that highlight when someone isn't being treated as they should. Examples include environmental issues, children standing up for themselves, and issues that children may have some awareness of in their local areas, such as homelessness. Because engaging with current affairs also means children begin to relate wider issues to their own lives and communities and understand that they're connected to the rest of the world, that their thoughts and feelings about this are important. Teachers have said that children realise that the news, and not just children's news, is for them. One teacher told us, I also realised myself that actually children can deal with this stuff. Of course, it's important to keep children safe when discussing real news stories, and we develop guidance with our partners, the PSHE Association, on developing a safe climate for learning about the news. The lesson we receive the most positive feedback about is one that focuses on the Windrush scandal. It's proved really successful in showing why news is important and the role it plays in society. Children are outraged by this story, but it also helps them to understand the role of news in holding power to account, and the importance of the right to information and the difference that it can make when stories like this are reported. Of course, there are two different learning points here when using real news stories. A story like Windrush shows how the media can hold power to account by uncovering truth and telling people about it. But of course, we also need to consider how the media might be treating people unfairly themselves, looking at representation, balance, and bias and opinion versus fact. So key to this is critical literacy, and that's at the heart of everything that we do. So fostering active readers as opposed to passive absorbers of information. It's about asking questions that challenge information and explore how texts are constructed. So we're not just giving children answers or a rule to learn, but the skills to interrogate the text themselves. So here on the screen is the Newswise code. So when reading the news, you should always stop, ask some questions, do some checks before you decide what you think about it. Because it could be fake, it could be biased, it could be misleading. And next to the code are the Newswise values. This is what news should be: truthful, fair, balanced, and interesting. This is what you want the news that you're reading and also the news that you're reporting yourself to live up to. And of course, using these guidelines with real news is what makes them work. So it means asking questions like, do I trust this source? Who wrote this? Do they have an agenda? Are all the relevant voices being represented? What's the language used to describe different people in the report? What are the layers of meaning? And if you have the confidence to ask these questions of a text, then you're in control of your understanding, your reaction, your response. Here are some examples of the real news stories in our resources. And using real stories to explore issues such as balanced news reporting helps to underline the consequences if a report is not balanced, because it's about real people, so there are real life consequences. So getting pupils to think about the importance of including multiple, maybe contrasting viewpoints. One effective way of doing this is to look at two very different examples of reporting on the same story and reflecting on questions like whose point of view can we hear and who's not included. And when looking at bias, great questions to ask include who do you want to defend and who do you want to criticise, and how's the writer made you feel this way? For example, looking at the vocabulary used to describe different people in the story. And of course, looking at a range of headlines from different publications is another impactful way to highlight how the same story can be presented in lots of different ways. And using a real story is also a great way to explore in a safe way how social media can spread opinion and rumour, and the importance of identifying the difference between these and fact. So presenting information in a way you might find it in the wild. So for example, if a breaking news story was happening, all of that information that comes at you, how do you know what you can trust and what you can't? We've used a genuine story here of a gorilla escaping from London Zoo. It happened a few years ago. And we've created statements in the form of tweets. And the object is to figure out which are the facts as opposed to speculation, rumour and opinion. A great activity to take this further is to ask children to identify just the facts and then use these to create their own 30-second news bulletin about the event. Because the very best way to consolidate all this learning about how the news is made and why news should be truthful, fair, balanced and interesting is to put it into practice by creating real news reports. As soon as children report a real story that has meaning to them, they're real journalists. They have a real purpose and audience for writing, and a huge amount of motivation, ownership and pride comes with this, and you get great writing outcomes. The best results come when you give children the opportunity to choose what to report on. You get an even greater sense of agency and purpose. And of course, everyone writes best when they're writing about something they care about. And because it's a real issue, there's a greater sense of responsibility. It has to be accurate and fair because it's about real people. It's an opportunity for children to take action, that other element of critical literacy, in response to something important to them and to make their voices heard. So examples of real stories that we've seen include a dangerous crossing outside school. This was actually picked up then by the local BBC radio station. So a really fantastic example of pupils bringing something to people's attention and making their voices heard. Another school did vandalism on school property and looked at the impact that it was having on the wider school community. And all through school wrote about teenage sugar consumption, and the year 5s interviewed the year 10s about what they were doing. And another school wrote about air pollution, so taking a global issue but investigating it at a local level. And all of these children have the opportunity to do real interviews and think about things like, who could you speak to? Who should be included in the story? How do you write a good question? How do you make sure you're covering both sides of the story? And they met people like local PCSOs, wider school community, other people in their community, Islington councillors, things like that. Now, since we started the project back in 2018, we've had lovely stories from schools about how the programme results in changing behaviours and attitudes in their pupils. A teacher who used Newswise with lower ability pupils as a form of intervention, just one lesson a week, said that these children have become increasingly confident in forming and voicing their own opinions. Another teacher reported there was less gossip in the playground. And these two quotes on the slide always stick with me because they really crystallise how you get children interested and involved in news and information literacy. You make them a part of it. So I'll just leave you with this one. So much of what Newswise brings up in its delivery is to do with the sort of person you want these children to become: compassionate, interested, resilient, critical, brave, truthful. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll look forward to discussing this further with you at the conference.